Well, hello there, Latifah Faisal. How you doing, little fella? First, I would like to mention that Latifah Faisal isn't very bright, and she is very malleable. Whatever the antique media is screeching about, she piles on with some memes that would insult the intelligence of someone with an IQ around room temperature. She reminds me of, it's a saying my dad uses about the media, the type of person who would go down the hill at the end of a battle and kill the wounded. Ooh, you did a good job there. If the antique media isn't talking about it, or you cannot cover the entire issue in a Facebook post that would fit on the back of a few business cards, she probably can't handle it. She was all in on the George Floyd hysteria, a career drug addict and career criminal who met his end at the hands of Derek Chauvin, which, by the way, I thought he should have got negligent manslaughter. By the way, just to put my 2 cents in, I didn't think he was innocent. Larry Elder has mentioned several of the people I'm going to talk about more than once, so I've kept this in my hip pocket for a while. Larry Elder's mentioned several of the people I'm going to talk about more than once. None of them were black. Was Latifah Faisal cheering on the lunatics when they burned down cities over this? Oh, wait, there were not mass riots over these deaths because these people were not black. These people are Tony Timpa in Dallas, Texas, a white guy, Angelo Quinto in Antioch, California, a Filipino man, and Edward Bronstein, or Bronstein, in Burbank, California, another white guy. Hey, Latifah Faisal, say their names. On August 10th, 2016, Timpa, who was 32 when he died, called 911 and asked for help. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, ding, depression, ding, bipolar disorder, ding, and anxiety disorder. But he was off his medications that day and had taken cocaine. I wonder a lot of times if these people develop these conditions. Oh, I did a bunch of drugs and wrecked my brain, and now I'm a schizo. So you'll notice that's a common theme. The Dallas Police Department, officers who responded to him, Sergeant Kevin Mansell, Senior Corporal Raymond Dominguez, and officers Dustin Dillard and Danny Vasquez were aware of this. The 911 operator told them, and Timpa himself admitted it. The cops put Timpa on his stomach, cuffed his hands and ankles, and kept him subdued in the prone position for more than 14 minutes. Vasquez pressed his knee into Timpa's back for the first 2 minutes, and Dillard did the same for the entire duration, even after Timpa had calmed. "Help me, you're going to kill me," he shouted. He became non-responsive for the last 3 minutes, and later he was pronounced dead. On the body camera footage, the officers can be heard making light of his apparent loss of consciousness. Asked if Timpa was still breathing, Dillard responded, "I think he's asleep," and said that they heard him snoring. Dominguez and Vasquez then joined in, joking that Timpa was a schoolboy who didn't want to go to class but could be lured out of bed with some Tutti Frutti waffles. The Dallas Morning News obtained body camera footage that was tied up in a legal battle for 3 years. The videos show Dallas police. Now, why didn't George Floyd's get tied up in a legal battle for years? I wonder why. Oh, yeah, he was black. The Dallas Morning News obtained body camera footage that was tied up in a legal battle for 3 years. The video showed Dallas police responding to Tony Timpa after Tony Timpa called 911 and told dispatchers he was off his medication and had used cocaine. These people dig themselves big holes. The Dallas Police Department's internal affairs investigation resulted in Dillard, Mansell, and Vasquez being disciplined for conduct discrediting the department. However, these allegations were later dropped. Vasquez and another officer present at Timpa's death also received written reprimands for discourtesy and unprofessionalism. Mansell and Vasquez were placed on administrative leave in December 2017. Dillard was also placed on leave in March 2018, but the officers returned to active duty in April after a cruiseote dropped the criminal case against him. See the links in the video description to watch this chaos for yourself. I'm not going to post it here. I wouldn't want to, even if I could. Hey kids, don't do drugs. Latifah Faisal, remember when the hordes of white folks burned down courthouses in Texas and private businesses over this? Oh, me neither, because it never happened. A 30-year-old Antioch, California man who died after being restrained by police in December succumbed to excited delirium and prescription drugs during the physical altercation with officers, the Contra Costa County Coroner's Office ruled Friday. Listen to that again, Latifah Faisal. A 30-year-old Filipino Antioch man, a Navy veteran, who died after being restrained by police in December succumbed to excited delirium and prescription drugs during the physical altercation with officers, the Contra Costa County Coroner's Office, try to say that fast 10 times, ruled Friday. The findings of how Angelo Quinto perished came came during a crowded coroner's inquest inside a Martinez courtroom that ended when a 15-member jury ruled the death an accident. But while the purpose of this hearing was to provide transparency and clarity into the controversial death that has drawn widespread community outrage and accusations that the police killed Quinto, Friday's event seemed to have an opposite effect. We expected this. We hoped that this wasn't the case, but we expected this, Quinto's stepfather said on the steps of the courthouse after the hearing. Quinto's family not only lambasted the findings, they called the entire event one-sided, pointing out that only the pathologists who conducted the autopsy and law enforcement officers were called to testify. On Tuesday, Antioch Police Chief Tammany Brooks offered a timeline of police's response, and I'm not going to read through all that. You can read it for yourself because it gets quite long. But suffice to say, Angelo Quinto was in a very bad state of mind. He was being aggressive with their mother, Maria Quinta Collins. He was kicking his legs. He was incredibly out of control. Brooks, I'll read this. Brooks then said officers changed position to restrain Angelo's thrashing legs while another officer spoke to his mother about his medical history. Officers determined Angelo was suffering a mental health crisis and summoned an ambulance at approximately 11:16 p.m., Brooks said, adding that 2 other officers arrived on scene due to the nature of the call. Basically, getting to the end of this, Angelo was taken to the hospital after this altercation, and where he died 3 days later. It took more than a month for the department to share details of the circumstances of Quinto's death, and his family has retained representation and filed a claim in advance of a possible lawsuit against the city. So I'll let you go, everybody else read that. It'll get too long. But he was in a very bad state of mind. Don't do drugs, kids. Come on. Say his name, Latifah Faisal. Say his name. And again, kids, don't do drugs. As an aside, Latifah Faisal, I hope you realize that Joe Biden's open borders, which you support unabashedly, and I have documented that, those open borders are causing more drugs to come over our southern border for Americans to abuse so they can become mental health calamities. Then their exasperated families can call the cops to deal with these people when they are in a chemical-induced rage. But Latifah, make sure you post stuff on Facebook feeling so bad about these people who die of drug overdoses. What's, to use a phrase of one of the worst vice presidents and one of the dumbest vice presidents of all time, what's the root cause of all these problems? Well, you've got drugs coming over the border, and you have idiots who like to sniff white stuff up their nose and use meth and fentanyl and all this other crap. And I'm sure you'll feel their pain. The root cause, your open borders that you support is exacerbating that problem. Now to the last one. Harrowing video has emerged of a California DUI suspect who died after screaming, "I can't breathe," while being held down by cops. Less than 2 months before George Floyd uttered the same haunting words to police in Minneapolis. Edward Bronstein, 38, was taken into custody on suspicion of driving under the influence by California Highway Patrol officer Dusty Osmondson after a traffic stop on March 31st, 2020. The suspect was taken to CHP's Altadena station, where officers tried to forcibly withdraw his blood to measure his alcohol level, but he reportedly refused. The 16-minute video captured by a sergeant shows Bronstein. I watched this one. I would advise against watching it if you get squeamish. The 16-minute video captured by the sergeant shows Bronstein kneeling on the ground while an officer presses his hands onto his shoulders, while another officer, who is off camera, orders him to comply with a court-ordered blood draw. "You are bringing the fight to this, not us," one of the cops says, and Bronstein replies, "I am not bringing the fight at all." An officer then warns him that if he refuses to comply, you are going face down on the mat and we are going to keep on going. After being held to the ground, Bronstein shouts, "I'll do it willingly, I'll do it willingly." Several more officers pinned him down with their bodies as he shouts in distress before finally saying, "I can't breathe." After Bronstein stops moving, another minute elapses before the officers realize he is not responding and try to revive him. As he lies face down, one of them slaps him on the head before he is finally turned over. An officer then asks for CPR to be given, but more than 11 minutes elapse after Bronstein's last screams before they begin to administer it. Bronstein's family has filed a federal lawsuit against 9 officers and a sergeant alleging excessive force and a violation of civil rights. The family is also calling for cops to be criminally charged by the L.A. District Attorney. I wonder if the L.A. District Attorney will treat the cops like they treat a lot of other people around there. But go watch it for yourself. Come to your own conclusion. Again, Mr. Bronstein also has some chemical issues. That's one very common theme I've seen a lot of these, as these people are mental health cases due to drug abuse. But anyways, Latifah Faisal, say their names.
Edition of the program. Serious story out there that I don't think is going to get very much attention. Although arguably, given what happened with George Floyd, it should. And this is a tough story, and many of you may not have heard about it at all, but it comes from Los Angeles. We're reading from the Daily Mail. They have the video up. It is a difficult watch. Buck, you sent this to me earlier today so that I could watch it in prep for the show. And I'm just going to give you a rough outline of the story here. A 38-year-old man named Edward Bronstein died on March 31st of 2020, a little over 2 months before the George Floyd incident. Footage of his death was just released by the police department in Los Angeles yesterday after his family sued so that they could see the video surrounding his death. This 38-year-old man, by the way, father of 2, was pulled over for suspicion of drunk driving, and they were trying to take blood from him to determine whether or not he was drunk. And he was forced onto a mat in the police station garage. He was handcuffed. 5 L.A. police officers then kneeled on his back while they put the needle in to extract blood. His family says that he had an incredible fear of needles. He screams, "I can't breathe," 11 times before eventually going silent. This is a really hard tape to watch. Buck, you and I, from the moment the George Floyd video went public, we are, first of all, defenders of police in general. We need more police. We need as talented of people as possible willing to take on the job of police. But sometimes police, like people who have every sort of profession under the sun, behave in ways that may well be illegal. And when that occurs, there need to be charges that are brought. What is devastating about watching this video is this man, 38-year-old, again, Edward Bronstein, he's a white guy. Same thing happens to him that happened to George Floyd, and this was over 2 years ago. The tape is just now coming out. When we talk about larger police issues, I think oftentimes when race is made the primary focus, it misses the larger story. Buck, you look at the data from the Washington Post, 75% of people who are killed by police every year are white, Asian, or Hispanic. I think that data stuns people when they hear that 75% of people who are killed by police are white, Asian, and Hispanic. And so what will be interesting is as this lawsuit progresses, and given the fact that this video is now out and the man is saying basically the same exact thing that George Floyd said, will a white man being knelt on by 5 different police officers in Los Angeles, will this be a story at all? Will there be any marches? Will there be any discussion about this in the larger cultural sphere?
The law enforcement agency involved here was California Highway Patrol. And they were the ones that then fought the release of this tape. And we could play just the audio for you. It's bone chilling. I mean, it's horrifying. This guy, Bronstein, now deceased, the guy's a father. I mean, there's a photo on the Daily Mail you see of his little daughter. He is screaming for his life and screaming, "I can't breathe."
11 times.
11 times. The exact same thing that George Floyd was screaming. Now, The video of George Floyd was taken by bystanders that got out there sooner. I understand that there are some differences here in the situation. I'd also say that in this case, you'll have to look at the specifics of Bronstein is essentially he's already handcuffed, hands behind his back, handcuffed. He's on his knees on a mat. This is over a DUI issue. He poses no threat to any of the officers around him. And right when they go to grab him, he says he'll comply for the blood test. They say, too late. We're doing it this way. And they have, I think, 4 officers kneel on him. And he's screaming, and you can hear he's in absolute hysterics. And he's screaming, I can't breathe. And he dies right there. He dies on the video. And it's absolutely horrific. Now, Clay and I thought this is a story you should know about because, first of all, the narrative immediately with George Floyd, it wasn't so much that it was a case of police brutality. It's that it was a case of racist police brutality. That was assumed right away. And when you actually understand more about cases across the country, Clay mentioned the Washington Post numbers, what you find is that, yeah, there are cops who cross the line. There are cops who do bad things. But law enforcement in general in America is actually not racist.
Yes.
And the left and the Democrats and the progressives run with this narrative at the first opportunity, and they don't ever stop to look at the facts. I mean, here you see that this police restraint of a shoulder on the back or the neck, in some circumstances, clearly can be fatal for people. And it wasn't just something that happened to George Floyd. It happened to this individual, Bronstein, before the George Floyd incident, just to be clear. And then, Clay, on top of it, we have the part of this will not result in marches. This will not be BLM, a national phenomenon that we all have to talk about and have a long conversation about police violence or anything else, because it doesn't fit the racial component and it doesn't have that narrative heft from the left. They will not care about this story. They will not care about police violence in this case.
5 officers involved, no charges brought against any of the officers so far. The L.A. County Coroner's Office ruled that this man, Bronstein, died, quote, as a result of acute methamphetamine intoxication during restraint by law enforcement. Very similar to the argument that the police officers put forward in the George Floyd case,
exactly
which
right.
was
Yep.
Floyd was under the influence of drugs, and that was what caused his death, not the actions of the police officers. That was the defense. So in this situation, the 5 officers not charged and the L.A. County coroner's determination that the drugs caused the death, not the police officers' actions, has been accepted without any argument to the contrary. Now, maybe with the video out, reminder, this happened before George Floyd, happened in March of 2020. And, Buck, it's interesting to think about how different George Floyd situation might have been covered if this Bronstein video had been public at the time, because one of the primary arguments, you remember this, of Black Lives Matter was this would never have happened to a white guy.
They say it all the time. All the time. And it is not true.
Not true. And most of you will never hear about this story, the Edward Bronstein story. My prediction, maybe this will turn into a big story. I bet that most of you will not hear a single word about this story in mainstream media at all, because it challenges the narrative that this was a race-based murder, which is what was said about George Floyd. And it remains to be seen what's going to happen to these California Highway Patrol officers, and also whether there will be any sort of consequences as a result of these actions. But we just wanted to share it with you because it's a larger picture of what goes on on a day-to-day basis.